The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, February 18th. I'm Donna Will, Professional Development Coordinator for the Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you to the Self-Directed Budget Sheet Demonstration. Today we have multiple presenters. We have Nick Burton, the Central Region Director. We have the Self-Directed Leads for each region, and that includes Ola Atuyulu from Central, Tia Henry from Southern, Tina Swink from Western, Jonna Hitch from the Eastern Shore. We also have Dr. Yamanja Smalls, he's the Director of Coordination of Community Services, and Natoya Mitchell, also with Self-Directed Services. We also have Rhonda Workman, Director of Federal Programs, and I think that's it. So before we get started, I'm going to just remind everyone that you're in listen-only mode, and there's two options to hear the webinar, and that's by computer and phone. And if you look on the right, you can see the audio section, and you can click either option to switch. There's two handouts for this webinar, and they are not loaded presently, but they will be in about 5 to 10 minutes. So if you can't download them, you can always email me. We are recording the webinar, and we will be posting the link on the website. Questions can be typed in the question or chat box in the webinar panel, and then we'll get to those towards the end of the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce Nick Burton. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. I hope that you are all staying warm and cozy on this wintry day. The DDA welcomes you to today's webinar, which is focused on the self-directed budget sheet. This webinar will provide an overview of the tools and supports available to develop a self-directed service budget and also include a live demonstration. The DDA is committed to ensuring the success and growth of self-directed services. Success and growth requires good collaboration with participants, families, support brokers, and CCS agencies. Each of you come to the table with a vantage point, whether it be lived experience, navigating resources, understanding DDA services, person-centered plan development, or helping create a self-directed service budget to ensure a person can meet their needs. The role each of you play is important and necessary to ensure the continued success of self-directed services for people with developmental disabilities. We want to ensure that all of you have the tools and support you need to fully engage in this process. We strive to create guidance that is comprehensive and, at the end of the day, useful. We may not cover every situation or scenario today, and that is not our intent, but the tools and the guidance we have issued should provide a solid base from which to stand. Across all regions, the DDA is here to support you and walk through individual situations as necessary so that everyone at the table can move forward with confidence. Next slide, Donna. So our agenda today is an introduction, a discussion about the budget development resources and tools, which will include the Self-Directed Services Handbook, instruction for DDA's Self-Directed Service Budget Sheet, the actual budget sheet, and the DDA's Self-Directed Service Reasonable and Customary Rates. As mentioned earlier, we will then do a budget sheet demonstration, and then we will have some questions. Next slide. Whether an individual is receiving their services through DDA's traditional or self-directed service model, the DDA believes that people are in the driver's seat when it comes to their life, PCP, and making choices. This value is a major tenet of the self-directed service model which gives people budget and employer authority as it relates to their needed services. As mentioned earlier, we will review resources and tools to assist participants and their teams with the self-directed budget development process based on participants' assessed need and service requests noted within the person-centered plan detailed service authorization section. We will also demonstrate the completion of a budget. The goal is to help stakeholders better understand available resources and tools and the process of creating a self-directed budget based on the assessed needs outlined in the person-centered plan as they move along their path towards a self-directed life in their chosen community. Next page. We're going to start by sharing the budget development resources created by the DDA. The DDA believes that in order for you to meaningfully contribute to the process, it is important that we provide the best resources, tools, and support so that everyone at the table is equipped to strengthen self-directed services. Next slide. Recently, the DDA has updated self-directed guidance and tools, which have been posted on the DDA website. To access and view information related to self-directed services from the DDA homepage, you can click on the self-directed service link from the left navigation panel under Services We Provide. You can see that with the red arrow on the left of your screen. This will bring you to the DDA Self-Directed Services dedicated page that includes an overview of self-direction, FAQs, popular links, and resources and information. The resources and information list includes a link to the self-directed services and guidance forms and webinars, which is identified on the right hand of your screen with the red arrow. Next slide. The self-directed services and guidance forms and webinars dedicated page includes several pieces of guidance, forms, and the recent self-directed service webinars as noted on this slide. We are also reviewing older forms for updates needed and will post on this web page. Some key recent updates, as highlighted with the red arrows, include the self-directed services, a handbook for people with developmental disabilities who are interested in directing their DDA services in Maryland. That was posted on February 10th, 2021. This handbook provides a great summary of the participants' responsibilities when self-directing their own services, but also dives into the roles of the participant support system in creating a plan, such as their CCS, family, friends, FMS, or support broker. On the next slide, I will discuss this handbook in a little bit more detail. There also on this page is the instructions for DDA's self-directed service budget sheet and the actual self-directed service budget sheet. The self-directed budget instructions is a helpful step-by-step guide that walks you through the self-directed service budget line by line. I would encourage you to ensure these instructions are handy when you are working on creating a self-directed service budget. On this page, there is also the DDA self-directed service reasonable and customary rates, the DDA support broker list, and our two most recent webinars regarding self-directed person-centered plan, process rates, and COLAs for coordinators of community service and providers, as well as participants and families. There's a link to the webinar as well as the PowerPoint. Please take advantage of the DDA's recorded webinars. The guidance and tools provided is valuable as you continue to engage in the self-directed service plan and budget development. I will say that at least once a week, I go back and listen to various sections of webinars just to confirm that I have the right information. Next slide. The Self-Directed Services, a handbook for people with developmental disabilities who are interested in directing their DDA services in Maryland, was developed by working with participants, support brokers, and consultants. As reflected on the screen, the handbook addresses various topics as noted in the table of contents. The DDA encourages use of this guide with new participants and families considering self-direction, as well as current participants and families who would appreciate a refresher regarding roles and responsibilities of hiring and managing employees. This handbook is also a fantastic training tool for new and seasoned CCS. Upon first glance, 31 pages seems daunting, but as you become familiar with this document, it will be a time saver when providing an overview of self-directed services. Next slide, please. So the instructions for DDA's self-direction services budget sheet. The instructions include details on how to complete the self-directed service budget sheet. For each DDA self-directed service, you will find a brief description of the service and some important information to consider. We have included a picture of the service as noted on the budget sheet and instructions on what information is needed to be included. Services reflected in the self-directed service budget sheet should match the services requested in the detailed service authorization section of the PCP. As the employer of record, the participant decides whether to hire staff or use a vendor based on the service, and also decides what rate to pay based on reasonable and customary ranges. For additional information about services, requirements, staff and provider qualifications, and service limitations, please refer to the federally approved DDA waiver program for which the person is enrolled. Another helpful tool is the DDA's Service Authorization Guidelines, which are located on our PCP webpage. The budget tool can feel overwhelming, particularly your first time utilizing the tool. It's okay to spend a little extra time in some sections, particularly when wrapping your head around benefits, training, or mileage. I want to encourage all of you to keep a copy of the budget development instructions available for quick reference. Keep a copy handy so that it's readily accessible when you need it. Some folks may find it helpful to print and highlight or take notes on, whatever works for you. It's okay to reference the instructions, and it's okay to ask questions if you need support. That is why the regions are here. Each region's self-directed service lead is very comfortable with the self-directed service budgets and are here to support you. The more you use the instructions and the tool, the more comfortable you will be. The more comfortable you are, the more knowledgeable and efficient you will be in completing self-directed service budgets. Next slide. This sheet is designed to help participants develop and stay within their allocated budget. The yellow spaces within the budget sheet may be filled in. White spaces will auto-calculate and cannot be changed. We will demonstrate the completion of the budget sheet later on in this presentation. This slide also shows that the budget sheet includes four tabs or worksheets within it, as noted at the bottom of the sheet on the slide. The first tab or worksheet is the self-directed service budget sheet, which is displayed. The second tab is labeled Instructions and includes a link to the instructions we just reviewed. The third tab includes the budget modification form, and the fourth tab includes links to the DDA approved waivers, applications, and an overview of the waiver application layout. Next slide. Under the DDA's Family Support, Community Supports, and Community Pathways waiver, participants using the self-directed service delivery model can establish their own payment rates for approved services. However, these rates must be reasonable and customary. The DDA Self-Directed Services Reasonable and Customary Rates table provides information on average rates for services and the range of DDA approved rates considered reasonable and customary. We have heard that some people think the rates are high. The rates are based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics wage and include the following cost components: employee-related expenses, program support, facility, rehabilitation only, training, transportation, general and administrative, and service adjustments, depending on the service. This means the rate already includes funding to cover employee taxes, mileage reimbursement, training, and benefits, or can be used to hire a vendor or DDA provider. In terms of the specific wage or rate of pay per hour for staff, at the very least, staff need to be paid a minimum wage for their county as per local and state requirements. The DDA is reviewing this tool and will be sharing updates to better clarify the minimum pay rate that can be used. The geographic differential range is to be used when the person receiving services lives in one of the following counties: Calvert, Charles, Frederick, Montgomery, or Prince George's. The maximum rates and geographical differential applies under both the self-directed and traditional service delivery models. Next slide.
Thank you, Nick. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Rhonda Workman. Services reflected in the self-directed budget sheet, as Nick mentioned and outlined in the instructions, should match the services noted in the Person-Centered Plan Service Authorization section. Before filling out the self-directed budget sheet, let's look at a Person-Centered Plan Service Authorization section example that we will be using for our budget sheet demonstration today. Next slide, please. For our demonstration today, we will pretend that this is Jane Doe's annual Person-Centered Plan Service Authorization section based on her assessed needs. We will review each line so that we can all understand what the information means and how this information is then used to create the self-directed budget. Next slide, please. So based on Jane's current needs, we see she is seeking to increase her respite care services for camp and also seeks to receive 28 hours of respite in the month of May, which is displayed as 112 15-minute units as noted within the LTSS system. Next slide, please. Jane is also seeking to increase her personal support services to support an average of 24 to 28 hours per week. This is displayed in the system in 15-minute units and varies from 384 to 448 15-minute units per month based on Jane's anticipated assessed need and her schedule for services. Next slide, please. Jane is also seeking supports from the Community Development Services. She's looking to receive approximately 16 to 18 hours per week, again based on her needs and schedule. You will see on this slide, as per Amendment number 3 in our recent guidance that have gone out, this service has been converted from hours to 15-minute units to provide more service flexibility. This change is in effect beginning March. Jane's CDS services request, as noted here on our slide, from September to February are noted in hourly units, and her CDS service requests from March to September are reflected in 15-minute units. This is why you're seeing such a great increase from the numbers. We have converted hourly services to 15-minute services. Next slide, please. Jane, as person self-directing, also wants to access the individual and family-directed goods and services, staff recruitment, and advertisement supports. This is a service that is available for up to $500 that can be used throughout the year. On the slide, you see that there's a checkbox for each month indicating that that service and those funds can be accessed at any time. Next slide, please. This slide is showing the request for transportation services. You'll see that there's a decrease in the standalone transportation services due to most of the transportation supports that will be provided to Jane will be within her personal supports and CDS services. In other words, her staff will be supporting her in terms of transportation. As shared by Nick during the review of the reasonable and customary rates, please remember that the rates used to establish the CDS and the personal supports budget allocation includes that cost component for transportation. Therefore, as budgets are being created, teams will need to ensure funding for transportation reimbursement for staff, as noted within the specific service benefit section that we will show during our demonstration. Several self-directed budgets currently include a lot of funding in the standalone transportation line item. As we're reviewing and supporting teams over the next few months for reviewing of all self-directed budgets and plans, this will be the great opportunity to align and make sure that the transportation is appropriately allocated under the appropriate services. Next slide, please. Jane is also using a support broker to assist her with coaching and mentoring in terms of her employment-related responsibilities. She's seeking to receive up to 4 hours per month, as indicated here on this slide. Next slide, please. And finally, when you look at Jane's total plan year cost for all those services that we just reviewed on this screen and is indicated in LTSS, it shows that the total cost equates up to $101,320.32. It also indicates that Jane has funding that has been authorized under DDA state-only dollars. So we will use this budget amount, the total plan year cost, in terms of looking at creating the self-directed budget. Next slide, please. Now that we've reviewed the person-centered plan, we can now create the self-directed budget sheet based on the same services reflected in the service authorization section we just reviewed. Remember, there are several options the participant will be making decisions on, such as hiring staff or using a vendor. If hiring staff, the participant, as the employer of record, will also make decisions on the staff pay rate, training expenses, travel reimbursement, and other benefits as outlined in the instruction sheets. For example, today, we are going to assume that Jane lives in Frederick County. This means that when considering rates, we will use the geographical differential range. I created a budget sheet based on Jane's person-centered plan, and we will walk through that next and show how Jane's budget could look and how that sheet calculates cost automatically. As noted in the instruction sheet, it is important to note that participants are not required to allocate their entire budget. Remember, the budget is based on DDA's traditional rates, which includes cost components to address staff training, transportation, employer-related costs, program service costs, and administrative costs. Presently, the DDA is paying for administrative costs associated with coordination of community services and the fiscal management services, which will not come out of the participant's budget. Therefore, participants should consider their current assessed needs as authorized in the person-centered plan and the reasonable and customary rates when developing their self-directed budget sheet, and may decide to offer future pay increases or benefits during the year based on the staff performance. And now we're going to pull up the budget sheet and demonstrate how we use the person-centered plan services we just reviewed is noted in the budget sheet. Donna, can you please confirm that the budget sheet is showing on the screen?
Yes.
Thank you. So you'll see we've pulled up the budget sheet, and in the handout section, we've also included a copy. You'll see on the budget sheet that they entered the person's name here, Jane Doe. We've noted the effective date, which was for her annual plan beginning September 13, 2020. We've got the option to indicate the different type of plan as a drop-down option. For Jane, this is her annual plan. We also have the ability to select the specific waiver program. Jane is enrolled in the Community Pathways waiver, so that's selected. You'll see here that we entered Jane's budget based on that total plan cost we just reviewed. The box to the right indicates the budget sheet that we've completed, and we'll go through what the current cost or expenses we've allocated towards our budget. This is the budget tool is dynamic and will automatically calculate for us. So for example, if Jane's budget was actually only $50,000, you'll see that it shows that our current budget that we've created equates to $78,000, but yet it exceeds our $50,000 budget. So this tool can provide key kind of indicators if we've already overcommitted some of our funds. But let's put back in Jane's total proposed allocated budget based on the service plan we just looked at. You'll see when we put it back in, we still have the same total cost amount, but this box has changed from being pink and has gone back to white. So let's walk through the different services that Jane's going to be using. On the budget sheet, you'll see that the first service option is related to the fiscal management services. As we've noted, fiscal management services will not be taken out of Jane's budget. So for people filling out the form, basically you would enter the name of the agency, whether it's the ARC or MedSource, by just basically typing in the name. The next service that Jane noted that she would be receiving is our support broker services to assist her. Under support broker services, Jane has the option to hire her own staff or to use a vendor. You will see throughout the budget sheet that we have formatted it so that when there's services that you can hire your own staff, the staff information in terms of the number of staff, health benefits, training, transportation, travel reimbursement, and addition to taxes, all related to staff that are hired by the participant, will be shown first. The next section would include the option to hire a support broker, vendor, or contractor. So again, for each section of services, staff will be noted first as an option, and then the vendor contractor second. For today's example, we're going to note that Jane has decided to use a contractor or vendor. So to complete this, as noted in the detailed service authorization section, we would note 4 hours per month, which was noted in the person-centered plan. Because we're going to use that vendor or contractor, we would look at our reasonable and customary rate range for the geographical differential, since Jane lives in Frederick County, and we're going to use the high end, the maximum of the $65. We've noted the number of months of services, which as in our person-centered plan showed that we were going to use this service throughout the year, and we would note 12. To demonstrate that the budget sheet will automatically calculate, I'm going to change the rate of pay that we propose to pay for the support broker agency to 50. When I enter 50 and I hit enter, you'll see that it automatically changes the annual budget cost. It now reflects $2,400. When I go in and change this back to $65 and hit enter, it will automatically update and go back to $3,120. Any changes in the yellow boxes that we make will automatically calculate in the white boxes and will be reflected in the total budget cost sum at the top of the screen. So let's go on to the next service that Jane is going to receive. Jane is seeking to receive personal support services. And as I mentioned, she has the option to work with a personal support staff, hiring them herself, or to work with a vendor. So for this example, let's say that Jane decides that she's going to hire staff. And not only hire staff, but Jane uses 3 different staff. As per we noted in the person-centered plan, Jane is looking at receiving 24 to 26 hours per week. It kind of differs based on the year and the time of the year and the services and supports in her schedule. So the first staff, we've just noted that they are going to be providing 26 hours per week. We've entered a rate of pay and the number of weeks that are applicable. This all equates back to Jane's person-centered plan. The second staff will be working 28 hours a week. The third staff, 24 hours a week. And so we're reflecting the different hours and pay rates to equate to the total year, 52 weeks during the year. You will see that for the pay rates that we've noted here, that we've chose to provide a pay rate that is above Frederick County's minimum wage, but we are not using the minimum or the maximum range noted on our reasonable and customary range, because that is the fully loaded rate. Remember, it includes not only the wage, which we're noting here, but also those benefits, transportation, training, and such. So for our example, we're going to pay our staff different rates, maybe because we're just hiring a new staff and we're going to start them out at 15, but we also have seasoned staff that we're paying maybe $20. As I mentioned before, any changes in any of these numbers will affect the numbers in terms of the total budget cost and also our total cost calculation. For example, if I wish to change the first one to note that for 30 weeks, they're going to be providing services at a rate of $25, you'll see that the numbers are automatically changing and updating both in the annual total projected cost and also the allocated budgets that we've noted here. Going down further in the budget sheet, as noted in numerous of the sections for staff options, we can note any specific benefits that we would like to provide for our staff. These areas here are all common throughout options for staff. So you'll note that we noted for training, for the 3 staff that we would like to use, we're projecting a cost of $250 per staff because we'd like to get them trained in addition to their CPR and first aid, maybe some additional skills in terms of supporting Jane, and that automatically calculates for the total cost. We've also noticed that our staff will be supporting us in terms of transportation, and so we're going to allocate funds for mileage reimbursement. For personal supports, for this example, let's assume that we're looking at approximately 30 miles per day of supports that we would be received. That would equate to 7 days a week would equate to 210 miles. We've noted the mileage rate, taking that from the reasonable customary rate range, and the number of weeks, noting 52 weeks in the year, which automatically calculates a budget for our transportation mileage reimbursement. We can also add, based on our own business model, whether we're going to be providing additional benefits, using different types of transportation, and also must include taxes. As noted in our instruction sheet, we note that it should include a 14% tax, which would then the FMS would be using to allocate for the fringe benefit and associated taxes. This will automatically calculate within our form. Just note, as in our instruction sheet for the budget, if an individual resides in Montgomery County, there is a requirement for sick and safe leave. So please refer to that and follow the instructions that are in the guidance. Moving down a little further, we see that Jane has also decided to have emergency backup staff allocated in the event of weather situations where primary staff are available to support her. In this situation, Jane to use a vendor, be on call and assist her in the cancellation or challenge staff. Allocate 20 for this and to kind of use during the year. So she's 20 hours per week that she proposes to, and then it notes that means basically 20 hours for the course, and it auto-calculate the cost. Going into the next
breaking in.
We know that rest.
Hey, Rhonda, you're breaking in and out.
Can you hear me better now? Patricia, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. Right.
Okay, you can hear me now? Great. Okay, let me take off my headset and we'll use directly with the mic. I'm sorry. Patricia, do you want me to go back through personal supports or keep moving forward?
Let's go ahead and keep moving forward because there's several questions in reference to that, and then we can go back to the tool as we go through the question.
Great. So the next service that Jane has in her plan is respite. And so for respite, we note that Jane has chosen, she can choose to hire staff and note benefits related to that, or she can hire a vendor. So as you may recall, in Jane's person-centered plan, she had two respite options. The first one was for camp, for which there was an allocation of $3,458, we've noted here. And then the second option was to receive 28 hours. I believe it was noted in the month of May. And so we've noted that here. Jane is going to choose to hire a vendor or contractor and noted the pay rate based on the reasonable customary range. Going to the next service that Jane has noted in her person-centered plan, we go down to individual and family directed goods and services. You may recall Jane is seeking to use that $500 for staff recruitment and advertisement, which she has noted here in the yellow box. The next service Jane seeks to use is the community development supports. And from the community development services, again, Jane can use and decide to hire staff or to use a vendor. We've noted in this example, Jane is choosing to use 4 staff to support her in her community development services. We've noted different hours of week that the staff will be providing and also noted different pay rates. Again, using that reasonable customary rates, Jane must ensure that she pays at least minimum wage. And for some staff, she may decide her seasoned staff to pay more. We note the number of weeks and it automatically calculates. Jane can decide if she wants to provide any additional benefits. We've noted training for the 4 staff, and we've also noted transportation to support Jane as she's integrating in her community. This equates to about 40 miles per day, 7 days a week, 280 miles, and then we noted the number of weeks, which is automatically calculating her transportation. We've noted the taxes here for the staff, and that equates for the CDS services. And the last 2 services that Jane had noted in her plan included the transportation services. You may recall that she had a budget allocated for $7,000 for this. Those services were noted in her plan to support her CDS and personal support services, which then should be noted within the specific services. But maybe Jane would like to learn some travel training skills. So she could use the standalone transportation service to hire an agency to help her learn travel training. So we've just noted that here in terms of cost per day and number of days. And finally, Jane included in her person-centered plan She has been approved for $500 for state-only funding, which we've noted here. After completing the budget sheet, based on this first review, we see that the total, based on those decisions and assumptions we've made, equates to $86,000. We are within our budget, which is a total of $101,000. Jane can go back and make some adjustments if she needs to. She can consider adding additional benefits, or she can submit her plan with the budget noted here, noting that if in the future she would like to provide incentives, pay increases for her staff, she has room within her budget to do that. And that concludes our demonstration.
Thank you, Rhonda. There is lots of questions, and I'm going to break them. I try to break them by category, but they just keep popping up. So let's go through the tool first, and then I think help people understand a little bit about the support broker rate. I think, and let me ask you 4 questions, Rhonda, to you about support broker, and if you can address them all into one. One is, when will the support broker service be changed into an upper pay limit instead of hourly rate? The other one is, will there be a written guidance from DDA to confirming that the new reasonable and customary rates include taxes and benefits? And then the other one is about how do you approve above the 4 hours for support broker?
So those are great questions. So let's start with the first one. In terms of support brokers being an upper pay limit, that is one of the units that we use to talk about how our services. Our services units could be 15 minutes, they could be hourly, monthly, or they could be something called an upper pay limit. In terms of the upper pay limit, that just provides the flexibility through the Medicaid system to build different rates up to the $65, because we know that participants, as the employer record, will be setting and choosing those rates to hire their staff, such as the support broker, based on the reasonable and customary range. So in terms of the budget sheet, we don't really need to worry about the upper pay limit. Just focus on whether you're going to hire staff, where you could have benefits if that's your choice, or you can hire a support broker as a vendor or contractor and just pay them not as a staff or an employee with benefits. Did I address them all?
I think so, yes. I'm going to go to Nick. We just received a letter indicating, well, let me just stick to this budget sheet because a lot of it are the budget sheets as opposed to the POLA questions. So this one is for Natoya. And I'm concerned that some of the changes are effective immediately. There are so many pieces to self-direction that the team needs to understand how the changes affect him or her or their individual. A week or two between this information comes out, very late. So what kind of resources support or can the DDA provide to people in self-directions to understand this? If you're talking to Toya, we can't hear you. All right, let's try and see. Let's see, Nick, can you answer that?
Sure, Patricia. Yeah, I think that part of making sure that people have the tools and support are kind of what we talked about today, right? It's that making sure that we're posting this information on our website, making sure that we're going to the webinars, making sure that we're doing these demonstrations, making sure that your CCSs have the information they need so that they can support you, making sure that the regions are available to walk through these processes. We also obviously acknowledge the fact that, as folks are updating their PCPs to reflect use of the detailed service authorization, we understood that that couldn't happen overnight. And as per our memo on the 31st of December, that is a process over the next few months, 4 or 5 months until June 30th to be able to get those updated. We also understand that as plans renew, And as issues pop up, whether they're emergent issues or, emergent to you issues, we want to be able to work with you and work through these. And that's why we have these tools, so that we can all go back and reference them when we're working through the issue to make sure that your needs can be met.
Nick, can you answer this other one? And this one is, where exactly do we get the budget amount for each subdirector individual?
Yeah, so as Rhonda was talking, when you're filling out your, when you're working on your PCP and you're developing your PCP and you're developing your detailed service authorization, that detailed service authorization will give you the total budget amount based on these needs and the services that you chose to meet your needs, which then you can take and enter into your budget sheet as demonstrated by Rhonda.
Thank you. This one is for Tina. Once the PCP has been approved and sent to the FMS, can the funds be moved to another approved line item without prior approval from the DDA? Currently, funds can be moved amongst approved line items and only requires the participant in CCS signature. Is this still a resource?
Yes, you can still, there is still a budget modification process that can be used as long as the two line items are in the approved budget. If you're changing your services on an extended basis, or adding or decreasing services that will be ongoing, then you would need to do a revised PCP.
And the form is on the screen. I think Rhonda's showing it, what you have to complete, right? Okay, Rhonda, this one's for you. The revised reasonable and customary minimum rates are much higher than what is currently used in my daughter's plan. Are the minimum rates required salary increase for staff?
That's a great question. And as Nick shared when he was presenting the overview of the reasonable and customary rates, the rates that we have noted are fully, what we call fully loaded, meaning that it includes not only the rate or the wage you would pay the staff, but it also includes funding to cover taxes, training, transportation, employee benefits and such. As we've mentioned today, as the employer of record, at a minimum, you must ensure that you pay at least the minimum wage of the county for which you reside. That means that you could pay less than the minimum rate that we've noted, and we will be providing additional information and guidance.
Thank you. Tia, this one's for you. My daughter's last PCP was approved prior to the new service rates and the use of the service detail tool. Can we submit a revised PCP so the budget can be adjusted with the FMS to reflect these changes, or do we have to wait until the annual plan is due?
You have until June 30th to submit a revised PCP to align your daughter's budget with the budget amounts in the DSA section of the PCP. You do not have to wait until your annual plan if it's after June 30th. But if it's prior to June 30th, you can submit it at that time as well.
Thank you, Tia. This is for you, Ola. How should something like staff CPR training be entered in the detailed service authorization? And Rhonda, can you show us where we could put that in the tool here? Go ahead, Ola.
Thank you, Patricia. As discussed earlier on in the training and overview of the DSA part of the PCP, the detailed service authorization consists of all of the services, the individual benefits, and training. So in your DSA, you would ideally not put in those specific trainings, but the hours the individual has been assessed to need. But when you now come to your self-directed spreadsheet, this page we're looking at right now, you are able to now allocate funds for training based on what has been populated in your DSA for that specific service of personal support.
Thank you, Ola. Okay, Rhonda, this one is for a clarity about personal supports. So personal supports now includes transportation funding, and that is capped, right?
That's a great question. Personal supports, transportation within the service of personal supports is not capped.
Okay, thank you. Tina, this one's for you. In the service authorization section, some of the services are showing monthly time allocation. Does this mean that self-direction now has amounts budgeted by month for these services? Will unused amounts be available the following month?
Yes, when you're developing your plan, your CCS can look at the service months within that detailed service authorization and mark the months in which that service would be received. And it should calculate through then and provide the amount within the DSA. But you still have the flexibility within your plan to receive those services when they are needed.
All right. Can you answer this one too, Tina? Will the LTSS cost always equal the approved budget?
Yes, as you're developing your annual plan, or if you're revising your plan, the services within that detailed service authorization would be the allocated budget amount for that time period.
Thank you. Rhonda, can you talk a little bit about standalone services? The question here is, would the standalone transportation be for services such as Uber or mobility to get to places when staff cannot provide transportation because the person's has a non-folding wheelchair? So they wanted to know a little bit about the standalone transportation and where would they put that in the budget?
That's a great question. And so the standalone transportation service, as we've noted in the instruction and in the waiver program, is really something to be used when you don't need your staff, when you don't need personal supports, your community development service staff, your job coaches, your employment service staff with you. This is when you are going out or needing transportation help within your own community. And it can include a variety of different things. As shown on the screen, we've got orientation and visual impairment services for people. It includes travel training. It can include public transportation, taxis, Ubers, and Lyfts. So if you are someone who needs an accessible vehicle or needs help or a ride to go to the grocery store, you're going independently, you could allocate funding there and call an Uber or Lyft or a taxi that could pick you up, take you there, and then bring you back after you do your shopping or such.
Thank you, Rhonda. You did mention employment services, and here's a question about that. Are all employment services available to self-direction with employer authority? And are there any training requirements that apply to self-direction staff to be able to provide any of the employment services?
What a great question. So I'm going to go down to the employment services and let's talk about that. As noted in the approved waiver application, there are two of the employment services for which someone self-directing has both employer and budget authority. Those options are for the ongoing job supports. So this is like having the job coach with you, and also the follow-along supports. Those are the two for which you can use budget and employer authority. The remaining services, our discovery services, are not employer authority. They do require specific higher qualifications in order to complete the discovery milestones. The self-employment development supports is another option that has employer authority only. It requires higher qualification to assist the person in developing business and marketing plan. In addition to our job development, it also requires a higher qualification. Again, participants self-directing can use all of the employment services that we've noted here, And the two for which they have employer and budget authority is the ongoing job supports and the follow-along supports only.
Thank you. Jonna, this one is for you. Are self-direction participants allowed to pay overtime as long as it's within their allocated budget?
So overtime hours are not something that we pre-approve in someone's budget.
So what would people need to do?
If there was a need for overtime, and that resulted in depletion of the budget, they would need to request additional supports if that was necessary. But I would encourage teams to look at their staffing schedules and needs to try and reduce a situation where overtime would occur and plan ahead.
Thank you. Rhonda, can DDA please address whether the max rate of $65 per hour is allowable for a non-agency support broker, or is it still only available for agencies? I'm sorry, I was going to call on Natoya, but I don't know if her phone is working still or not, or her thing. So let me just see. Natoya, are you still on? Can you answer that? If not, I'll flip it to Rhonda. Okay, go ahead, Rhonda.
Yeah, that's a good question. And so what we've noted in our charts and the reasonable customary rate, the maximum is the maximum that would be paid typically for a vendor or contractor, but we're providing that range. And so you would need to make those decisions based on your business model and whether you're using staff or a vendor in terms of the rates that you would be paying.
Thank you. Can you please clarify with the personal supports example how that will equal the minimum rate and how we figure that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as we've shared, we're going to be providing some additional information. We're going to look at our chart for the reasonable and customary range and see if we can provide additional clarity on that. What we're showing here in our budget sheet is that I have to at least pay minimum wage for Frederick County for all my staff. You will see that the rate that I've noted here, $15 an hour, $18 an hour, or $25 an hour, is not the minimum rate for personal supports under the reasonable and customary range that we noted. That's because in our chart, the reasonable customary range, it also includes the funds for benefits, training, transportation, and taxes. We're showing those expenses down here below in terms of the options of what we choose to provide for our staff. The main thing to note is that when you're hiring staff, that the rate you pay at a minimum must meet the minimum wage for that county.
Great, thank you, Rhonda. And I'm just going to emphasize with the group is that we have received lots of questions from families and participants about the rates, and they're getting confused about that they have to use the minimum or the maximum that is in the chart that we share. What I do want to say is that we're going to work with that chart to make it a little more simpler so that you can know exactly what would be that minimum wage for that jurisdiction or how it would be applied, so that you would know what your range is. Because I think people are getting confused. If you are not offering that amount that you have to, then you can use the funds for another service that you may in assess need. So we will update that chart and share with you all based on the feedback that we've received. It is 12:01. There's multiple awesome, great questions. What we're going to do is populate all the questions, see if we need to do a refresher training or additional training and guidance, or provide additional documentation in our website based on the questions that we've received. Again, we're here to support you in understanding self-direction in the budget. So we will definitely, I'm going to leave the chat on for a while. So if you have questions that we have not answered, please let us know. If you have COLA specific questions, please contact your regional director, or leads who should know the answers. We are partnering working with the FMS on applying the COLA on the memo that you received this week or last week. So please reach out to your self-direction lead who should be able to walk you through and answer some of those questions. We are going to share this questions with the team, put together some guidance, and then upload the information to the website. Again, we apologize that the handouts at the beginning didn't work. Donna is working to make sure that everybody who participated in this webinar does have the handouts for you to look at and go back and use as a refresher. She's already updated them, and now you should be able to print them out and see them. I think we had a hard time at the beginning. So thank you all very much. Be safe, stay warm, be healthy, and thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it. Let's leave it open a little bit, Donna, to see